Angela Duckworth and the Science of Grit. Good morning. We thought we'd close this arc with Covey's principles as the bedrock of a well-built life, but one thread was left hanging, and it's worth pulling on. Covey told us character must come before technique. Dweck told us belief about ability shapes whether we persist, but neither fully answered a very specific, very practical question. Across years, not moments, what actually predicts who finishes what they start? Today, we return to that question directly with a psychologist who spent her career trying to measure the very thing most of us assume is measurable: sustained passion and perseverance toward a single long-term goal. We arrive in the 2000s with Angela Duckworth, a former teacher turned psychologist who left a classroom career specifically because she kept noticing something strange. Her most academically talented students weren't always her most successful ones. Some of her most persistent, hard-working students with more modest, raw ability consistently outperformed peers who seemed naturally gifted but gave up at the first real difficulty. Duckworth left teaching to study this pattern formally, eventually developing what she called the grit scale, and publishing her research in a series of studies across West Point cadets, National Spelling Bee competitors, and Chicago public school students. Her 2016 book, Grit: The Power of Passion and Perseverance, brought the concept to a massive public audience. Duckworth defined grit as a combination of two distinct elements working together over time. Passion meaning sustained, consistent interest in a single overarching goal, not simply fleeting enthusiasm, and perseverance, the willingness to keep working toward that goal despite setbacks, plateaus, and failure, often over years or even decades. Her research found that grit predicted success and completion in academic settings, military training, and competitive events often more strongly than talent or IQ alone. Crucially, she distinguished grit from simple stubbornness or raw effort. Gritty people in her research weren't just working hard in the moment. They were organizing years of effort around a single coherent top-level goal, treating short-term setbacks as data to adjust strategy, not signals to change direction entirely. Sociologically, grit research raised sharp, sometimes uncomfortable questions about how institutions identify and reward talent. Duckworth's finding that grit often outpredicts raw ability challenge deeply embedded assumptions in education and hiring systems that prioritize measurable immediate aptitude over harder to see longer horizon persistence. This connects back to the achievement gap questions raised by Bandura and Dweck. If grit can be cultivated through supportive environments, consistent encouragement, and meaningful long-term goals, then society's institutions bear real responsibility for whether that cultivation happens equally across different communities. Only for those already given the stability and resources that make sustained long-term pursuit realistically possible in the first place. Psychologically, grit synthesizes several threads already running through this series. It depends on Bandura's self-efficacy to sustain effort through setbacks, on Dweck's growth mindset to interpret failure as useful information rather than a verdict, and on something close to Maslow's self-actualization to identify a genuinely meaningful long-term goal worth years of sustained effort in the first place. What Duckworth added specifically was an emphasis on coherence over time, the idea that scattering effort and passion across constantly shifting goals, even when or high energy and motivation in each individual pursuit, produces far less over a lifetime than sustained direction toward a single overarching aim, even when the aim requires enduring long stretches of difficulty boredom, or slow, invisible progress. But grit theory has faced substantial, well-documented pushback. Later meta-analysis found that grit's predictive power, while real, is considerably smaller than earlier popular accounts suggested, and overlaps heavily with existing well-established psychological traits, like consciousness, raising conscious questions about whether grit is a genuinely new construct or largely a packaging of concepts psychology already had established names for. Critics have raised the same factor concern we've encountered before, emphasizing individual grit risk obscuring real systemic barriers. A student without stable housing, reliable meals, or safety isn't simply low in grit. They are navigating circumstances that make sustained, single-minded pursuit of a distant goal a genuinely different challenge that it is for a student without those obstacles. Duckworth herself has acknowledges this tension directly, cautioning against using grit as a lens that blames individuals for structural disadvantage. Because grit gave the personal development world a genuinely useful, teachable vocabulary for something Carnegie, Maslow, Bandura, and Dweck had all circled around without naming directly. The specific discipline of staying the course year after year on a goal that matters. It reshaped how schools, sports, programs, and workplaces talk about long-term development, shifting focus away from single dramatic moments of talent and toward the much less glamorous architecture of sustained daily effort. It also offers a useful, sobering counterpoint to a culture of insistent feedback and rapid content consumption. In a world engineered for short attention spans and quick rewards, great research is a pointed reminder that most things generally worth achieving still require exactly what algorithms are designed to interrupt sustained and distracted focus on one thing over a very long time. So we add one more layer to the arc we thought we'd completed. Carnegie taught us to connect. Maslow mapped what we need. Bandura gave us belief. Mihaly described full engagement. Dweck explained resilience through failure. Goldman taught emotional management. Covey gave us principles to build a life on. And now, Duckworth reminds us that all of it ultimately has to be sustained, not for a moment or a year, but across the long, often unglamorous stretch that any genuinely meaningful goal actually requires. None of these ideas work in isolation, and none of them work only once. Personal growth was never a single insight or a single dramatic transformation. It's a set of capacities practiced imperfectly, renewed continuously across an entire life, exactly the kind of long game grit itself describes. Thank you and see you next time.